I'm Scott Vatcher, the host of Questioning Authority, where I question authority figures about health, wealth, and relationships. This episode is brought to you by theauthorityco.com, helping health professionals be seen as the go-to authority in their community. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Questioning Authority podcast. I'm your host, Scott Vatcher, and I question authority figures in business, health, and relationships. To help you, the listener, to achieve better outcomes in both your business and your life. And I've got with me today my special guest, Joel Lindeman. Thanks for being on the show, Joel.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
I met Joel on social media, and it was really very quickly the title of his book that really got me intrigued. And so we're going to dive deep into this book, because I think there's a lot of value in there for the listeners here who are mainly health professionals. And it can be a tough gig for us as health professionals. So the title of this book is called Purposely Positive. And I think having that positive outlook and mental attitude is so huge in today's world where there's so much negativity. And we're going to talk about negativity and how that could be a very good thing. And I'm very curious to see what Joel's response is to that. But let's talk about the book. It's called Purposely Positive. And you talk about living an intentional and inspired life. I want to break down those words for the audience. What do you mean when you use the word intentional?
Well, I think that too many people, in a way, kind of float through life. And I don't mean that necessarily they just do whatever happens to them. But I think in order to really create the life that we want to have and to be our best future self, I think we really need to be intentional about it. We need to have a plan. It doesn't have to be specifically written out for decades to come or anything, but I think that life is really not about what happens to us. You know, we've heard that before. It's about how we respond to it. And I think at any given moment, we have the ability to decide what we want to do with what's happening around us. And if we create that as a purpose, you know, daily, saying that I want my life to be this certain way, we can move into that intentionally, saying, okay, I have a plan for what I want to be when I grow up, for lack of a better way to describe it. But in the future, instead of just dreaming, we put action steps into it. And you know, and as far as inspired, to me, inspiration versus motivation is a big thing I kind of touch on in the book. And I think that too many times we get those two confused. And I think that motivation is great. I kind of compare motivation to happiness sometimes, where they're both, it's a wonderful thing, but if we're chasing motivation or we're chasing happiness, we're going to kind of run out of things, because to me, it's much more, inspiration is more of a joy thing. To me, it's much more like if we look at happiness or motivation as kind of a fire, to me, it's this big giant fire and it's exciting and things can come from that, but that you can't sustain a large fire. It's more about being a coal, smoldering joy behind that. And inspiration to me is that. What do we draw from? We can always tap into inspiration if we have the intent to do so. And we can tap into joy in any circumstance. And even if it's a real negative circumstance, we can learn from it. And we can decide, how is this going to better serve me in the future? So to me, I really think about being intentional with my life, about how can we become who we want to become for our families, for those that we serve, and for those around us, and building that legacy with intent based on what do I want to become and how can I make this event help me more into that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a little bit to break down there. So, you know, let's go back to intention.
Okay.
You sort of talk about it in a way of from what I gathered from it, and you expand on this, please. It's kind of like having a plan, but not necessarily something that's written down. So what are your thoughts on goals? Like, are goals something we should be shooting for? Is it something we should be like I've heard such a big thing about positives and negatives when it comes to like a to-do list, which is kind of like a mini goal setting. Like I always view it sort of from a medium term perspective, 3 to 4 month sort of goal patterns and resetting every time, because you get 3 or 4 months down the road, your goals could have changed. You could have, you know, things can change significantly. So what are your thoughts on that process of how, like, getting into a little bit more nitty gritty on intention? Like how can somebody who's maybe a little bit lost, like you said, floating, I like that word because it is very true. And if you don't have an intention in life, you probably look back a year from now and go, God, what have I done? So what might be something you would say to somebody who's listening and is a little bit stuck in that perspective? What's something they can do from an intentionality point of view to get the ball rolling?
Sure. I mean, I think that having big dreams and like even I know most people have, well, I don't know, I guess I shouldn't assume, but having a vision board or something like that where you have big dreams of the future is very important. But I think that, like you touched upon, is I think a lot of people from my experience will have these big dreams of the future and they don't have little steps of, well, instead of 20 years from now, what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months that I want to get to, and that's why a lot of people make vision boards. And I know my family has done it before. We make them, we put them in a closet, and then you never look at them again because it was fun to cut those pictures out. And it's like, oh, I'd love to have a yacht 20 years from now, but you have no process of, well, what does that look for in the next 3 to 6 months? So I'm to-do list I do a little bit of, but again, I think that really I like to think of it as working from the back. So if I want to be at a certain spot in my life 20 years from now, what is a step I need? What will that look like a year from now? And so we kind of break it down into smaller pieces. I don't know if you know Vishen Lakhani. He's got a website called Mind Valley. He's an author and he does a bunch of inspirational things. But he talks about basically, if you think of a quad, 4 boxes, and people can kind of fall into these boxes where you can be happy now with no dreams of the future. That's what I kind of alluded to, like kind of floating, like you're just kind of, well, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, let's just go with that. Or you're unhappy now and you have huge dreams of the future, which is just as bad, because you're like, well, I have this big dream, but I have no process of how to get there. Rarely is anybody really unhappy now and have no dreams of the future. And that's you're in a really bad spot if that's the case. Mm-hmm. But he talks about the biggest, what he calls being in the flow, is really being happy now and having dreams of the future. So I think breaking it down with intention is, well, if I want to get to a certain point here in 20 years, 5 years, whatever, well, what am I doing now that'll help me become that person or help me get to those goals? And what small changes do I need to make in order for those goals to kind of take steps towards those? I talk a little bit about it in the book about a lot of people look for a big impact. They want to have lightning strike or something like that. And that's always kind of bugged me because we're not built to sustain large impacts anyway. It's really about small steps that get us to where we need to go. So instead of trying to make a huge change, and it's pretty early in the year still, people with their New Year's resolutions are going to lose 50 pounds this year, and that starts to fizzle out by March because it's too big of a goal and it's not actionable. So I think really is if you have a goal to lose 50 pounds, if you want to do that, break it down. Well, that means I need to do 2 by next week or 2 by the end of the month. You know what I mean? And start breaking it down into smaller, more actionable steps. The problem is a lot of times people don't put I guess it doesn't look as glamorous. The small steps don't look nearly as glamorous as the big goal does, but the small steps are how you get to the big goal. And the big goal, if you do enough of those small steps over and over, the big goal is just a marker you're passing on the highway rather than being an end line, if that makes sense. You become the person that is worthy of those goals rather than trying to grab those goals themselves. So that's what I think is really about, making the smaller steps.
And would that be described, like what I'm hearing there is habits?
Yeah.
Small habits over time, like say in finances, we all have certain, I think that's a universal goal. No matter who you are, every single person listening right now has some kind of financial goal, whether it's they want to achieve this amount of money, this amount of clients, buy this thing, get this house, whatever the case might be. Finances is a big one. And like true growth in financial is so boring. Yeah. It's the little tiny little things you do, you get an account and put money away every month on auto debit or like these little things that if you just set them up and quote unquote create a habit, and those in reality, those are some of the simplest ones because literally you just put it on autopilot and don't even look at it ever again, except for like 20 years from now when that, $50 you put away is now $1 million. Like it's crazy, those types of things. But from a not financial point of view, from an inspired life point of view, it really is kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's the small habits and changes on a regular basis, whether it be daily or 10 times a day or weekly, that are going to make those huge changes. And I want to circle back to what you talked about before, the difference between motivation and inspiration. to me, it sounded like you were talking, like, I loved the way that you said motivation. I look at it like an emotion, like happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And happiness is one of those things that we feel like we want to achieve. And it's like when you get there, you're there. And,
Yeah.
and, and we all know in reality, that's not the case. Happiness is an emotion that is felt for a
Mm-hmm.
certain period of time and then it leaves. It's impossible to have happiness all the time. So I
Mm-hmm.
love the idea of you looking at motivation in a very similar way, but the inspiration behind it being super key. So let's again talk about that a little bit more. What can be, in your book when you talk about inspiration, what's something that somebody can start doing today to create a small habit to create or to look at inspiration in a different way?
Sure. Well, I think again, I think a little bit of it is if you want change, for me, it's a lot about inspiring change. And if you want to change anything in your life, you got to grasp the why of why you want to change. And then, again, there is an emotion that's attached to that, but you're not necessarily the big thing. I don't think you want to say, when I get here, I'll feel this emotion. The big thing is, to me, is why do I want to feel that emotion? And then you can start to do steps that give you that emotion in a smaller scale. Like one of the easiest analogies is losing weight. I think that, I have a background as a personal trainer. I don't do it. I was certified for a very short period of time. Well, I'm still certified, I guess, but for people, a lot of people want to lose weight and they have this big inspiration that they want to lose weight. And it's like, well, why do you want to lose that weight? And what's the impetus behind that? And then it's like, well, because of this. One of the things I talk about, you keep asking the question why, like you're a 2-year-old that keeps asking questions until you get down to the nitty gritty of what is the main reason that I want to lose the weight. And then if you get to that main reason, then you can do little things that get you that feeling and then just do those more and more over time. Like you said about habit, there's another great book I read a lot, but there's a book called Atomic Habits. It's one of my favorite books I've read recently, and he goes into great detail about how to build habits. And it's nothing. Usually, the people that want to create a new habit, there's a pretty big reason for creating that habit, but you don't start a brand new habit. It has to be a very small one, and into those steps to create those habits, and you create that neural pathway to recreate those and keep doing it. So, in order to be inspired to change, I think you guys say, okay, well, what's the end goal? What's the small things that'll get me to that end goal? And then grab the emotion, attach it to those small things, and just keep doing that consistently. If we look at it in a different realm, like meditation, I used to meditate a lot, and I still do a little, but not nearly as much as I did. I went all in on it too much again because I thought, oh, I could think meditation is going to be what I have to do to change, and I dove into it, and it drove me nuts because I wasn't very good at it. So it got to the point where it became worse for me than the goal of wanting to do meditation was, or not meditating, because it was more of like, oh, I can't stand that. So then you started breaking it. And you're like, well, I don't have to have a certain corner to meditate for an hour and a half. I can do a 5-minute meditation next to my bed in the morning, and you do little bite-sized pieces, and you get and you get better at it. And then you can expand on those and do more of what you want to do.
Yeah, it's a great point to when you find something that you want to achieve, to look at one motivation, then two inspiration, and then fit it into you, because we're all unique in that way. Where again, meditation, was and still is a big buzzword. Just like
Mm.
breath work or ice baths, or
Yeah.
there's newer things that come along all the time, and they may or may not work for you, but taking them for what they are, and then modifying for your own personal style. Like I totally agree with with meditation as one too,
Sure.
where I've tried on and off, but I do feel like the shorter ones work better for me. Like I have this thing that I put on my head,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives me biofeedback, and I find that to
Yeah.
be an amazing um, change for me. Like meditation without having something, a goal kind of thing to shoot for, like just
Yeah.
meditate was
Yeah.
very difficult for me. But having that goal of creating that neurofeedback,
Mm-hmm.
instant neurofeedback, knowing that big picture, yes, it was going to help, but short picture, that I could really change the way that that worked for me was huge for me. And so that really worked for me. So yeah, looking at that, but then creating that sort of self-image, or that impact that works just for you is really important.
Yeah, for sure.
In your book, you talk about identifying and removing anchors.
Hmm.
and how important that is to create positivity. So, what is an anchor?
So I think anything, well, I mean, the easiest answer is anything that's holding you back that from where you are now to where you want to be. It's the easy answer. The hardest part is identifying all of those. And I think we really need to do some, if you want to change, you got to do some deep searching and name them all, or as many as you can. You probably won't get them all. You know what I mean? It's some of the, like, oh, my dad said this to me when I was 3 or something like that. That's a big one. Those are the ones you go to a counselor for, things like that.
Yeah,
But there's
yeah,
little ones of, even some are just being comfortable now, kind of like we said with Shenlin said before, if you're really comfortable and you think you want to change, but it's really hard to change your day-to-day life if you're happy in it and you're content, even though you're not 100% content. That's why you have that little voice gnawing saying you do want to change. But I think one of the biggest anchors is stepping out of your comfort zone, and trying something different that in the long run will probably yield better results. But it's scary to do that. I mean, you have to give up a little bit of what you have or who you are now in order to become something different. So I think that's one of the biggest anchors. But I talk a little bit about it is really delving into why you think you are the way you are right now based on history, based on nature and nurture, both of those. And you kind of look into, well, what is it that I am that this way, and what about that is, am I really happy with those? And some of those anchors are good, like here's who made me who I am right now, and that's great, and we can build upon that. But if there's certain things that I don't want to be part of me anymore, we got to kind of evaluate those and really delve into what those might be. And the only way to do that is, again, just asking yourself why and where it came from. And then, there is a thing in psychology where there's different schools of thought where you have to go back into certain things and kind of remove them, or overcome them in order to change who you are now. And I don't know if I agree with that 100%. I think if, your past created you where you are now, and if there's something that is holding you back, you can figure out why and decide to change it now. Rather, you can't go back and change it anyway. You're not going to go back to what my dad said when I was 2. My dad's a great person. He never said anything to me when I was 2. I'm just using that as an example. Just so um, but it's things like that are holding you back even subconsciously. That I think is, if you can delve into, if there's anything that in your life, if you would write down a giant paragraph of who you are, and there's anything in there that is a belief that who you are that you don't think will help you become who you want to be, that is an anchor, and kind of figure out where that came from, and then
right.
regardless of where it came from, you can kind of say, well, I can decide to change that now, so.
Yeah, I think that's a important distinction there, is looking at beliefs, right? Because a belief in and of itself is not necessarily true, right? We all have beliefs and we all have different beliefs. So, from a strictly, uh, I don't know what you'd call it, lack of a better term, scientific point of view, is if both of us have a different belief about the same thing, which is true and which is not. Right? So a belief is something that we all gather through our lives, and it creates our philosophy, right? It creates the way that we view the world. So I think, yeah, looking back to see which of these beliefs may have a negative impact, because I always look at it where, if you want to create change in any way in your life, you don't necessarily look at the things that are going really well,
Mm-hmm.
because if it's going well, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
those areas where you're having that struggle or that impact or that positivity isn't there, that you need to dive a little bit deeper into and look at those belief patterns and write them out. Yeah, I believe this, I believe that. And there's definitely materials out there, and I'm sure inside your book is a similar process to help people go through that. And talking about that, the next question I have for you is around negativity. You know, the world right now, it seems to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that the human existence has negativity, in there
Mm-hmm.
already, like us as human beings. So, what is it about that you can expand on that? Negativity is necessary.
So yeah, I think one of the big premise, well, one thing, like the name of my book, Purposely Positive, I still like the name, but I also don't want people to think that it's like, oh, this book's about just pretending you're happy all the time. That's not what it's. I actually think the opposite is, I think every emotion, there's a reason that we have those, and we were given those by God, or whatever your belief system is, there's a reason those are in there. And no matter what it is, there's a purpose, right? And so I think as a culture, a lot of times we think that negativity all the time is this bad thing and we should push it away. And really, that's evolutionary that we're supposed to be afraid of certain things, and a lot of people look at fear as a negative emotion, and it's only negative if it freezes you, really. But and honestly, like I talk about in the book, is the some of the fears we have as humans, evolutionary, with like us, the same fear response that we have from running from a saber-toothed tiger is the same fear response we have of getting on stage and talking to people. We're not going to die. None of that's going to happen. We're not going to be lunch for something, but the fear still paralyzes us and it doesn't propel us into action. So to me, negative thoughts or negative emotions are just a way to inspire change. I mean, honestly, the reason we have those negative things is because we're supposed to do something with them. It's not we should push them away. It's like, okay, well, if I'm afraid of this certain thing, either I overcome that fear or I back away because I should be afraid of it. And so I think the big thing is using these negative emotions that are dubbed negative to actually teach us things or to propel us towards something. Like I make a distinction about guilt versus shame in the book, and they're very different. People kind of use those as a synonym sometimes, but guilt, when used, is it like if you did something wrong, guilt should say, okay, I'm not going to do that again, and you learn from that guilt. Shame is I did something wrong and I'm a horrible person. I'm just going to hold on to that for the rest of my life, and that's not positive at all. So there's a distinction between the two. The negative emotions are there in order to propel a change and to help us become something, or to learn from it, I guess, and become who we want to become, I guess is the best way to describe it. So my thing in the book is I think that negativity or any negative emotion is built in to help protect us from something or from things. It's just a matter of what we do with it. And I don't think we should get rid of all the negative emotions because they're trying to teach us things, but we also need to acknowledge them and help them. Let them help us instead of letting them feed themselves. Yes, it's the best one, I think.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier with negativity, almost in the fact that it's an emotion. It will come and go, right? Just like fear, it comes and it goes. It is an emotion. It's neither good nor bad. It is part of the human experience, and what can we do with that? So, you mentioned the word purpose. It's a very loaded word. I think some people love it and some people hate it, and it's very misunderstood. So what is your perspective on purpose, particularly around with it being your book purposely positive?
Yeah. So I think that one of the easiest things for me when I ask that question is to what it's not. I don't think that everybody should know their purpose in life from the day they're born or by the time they're 20 or 30 or anything like that. And I don't think purpose is necessarily tied to a vocation anyway. My purpose that I believe I'm here is just to help inspire others and to serve humanity. That's what my purpose is, and that what I just choose to do with my life that can touch into that purpose could be 1,000 different things. I'm a chiropractor and I wrote a book, and those are two ways that help me connect to my purpose. But I don't think that everybody, if you don't know your purpose right now, it's okay. I guess I'm trying to say that, but if there's things that you feel good doing, whether that's even just talking with somebody else, whether it is something that you're actually actively doing, there's probably a hint of purpose in there if it lights you up inside. I think that the purpose of our lives, there's something is I don't know if be happy, but there's things that make you feel good when you do them or when you think them or when you feel them, and I think that the purpose is connected to those in there somehow. And I think that you can really delve into, well, why do I feel good when I do this certain thing? And if you delve more into that, you'll probably get down to there's a hint of your purpose inside of that. So I guess a long-winded answer is that I don't think anybody necessarily or everybody necessarily needs to know their purpose in life as it's connected to a job. I think that that's a mistake that a lot of people make is, well, I don't know what I want to do, and therefore, I feel like I'm a bad human being, or I'm supposed to know. I have two boys, and they're both, and one just graduated high school, and one's a junior in high school, and a lot of the classmates there think they know what they want to do at age 15, and that's great, but I think a lot of them don't have a clue. There's so much life to change at that point, and they think that their purpose is a certain thing, but paths diverge like crazy. And I think the big thing is following what feels good in your heart and soul, and the purpose comes from that. Really, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think it can, again, it's quite misunderstood in that, people feel like there's a life purpose and I need to find it. And once I find it, then I'll be happy. And then that's my purpose forever. And,
Yeah.
and I think purpose can change
Oh,
significantly. Look at we've talked about your life. You mentioned already that you did have a personal training
mhm.
um, degree, or whatever
Yeah,
you call it, certification.
for sure.
And then and now you're a chiropractor, but then you've also become an author,
Mhm.
and you have two kids, and so purpose doesn't have to be this big, huge thing that we have to find, and that life is not meaningful until we do. Like, it is
Mhm.
created over time, and it changes all the time. And I think even if you have the thought process around thinking, what is my purpose?
Mhm.
Like that's probably the biggest step. It's being intentional around it, or being purposely
Yeah.
positive. I love it.
Yeah, and
um,
I think it's like you're saying that you never necessarily have to have that one answer of what my purpose is, because like you said, I think it evolves over time no matter what. And I think that at any given moment you can find purpose in what you're doing, whether it's hanging out with your friends, whether it's going on a walk, whether it's working at the Subway sandwich station. You can find some purpose there, and I think
mm,
that one of the easiest ones that I think is, I guess, in my mind, I feel like is lacking in humanity, because it's so divided in so many different ways right now in all these different categories. It's like there's A and there's Z, and it's hard to get to, like D, because they're so separate. Is
mm,
if we can find out, well, what am I doing right now that's helping somebody else, even in a small way? And I think that purpose is you're going to feel better if you can connect that. Like if you're, like I said, if you're at a Subway sandwich restaurant and you're working a horrible shift and nobody's there, but you're making that person a sandwich and it makes you feel good when you hand them that sandwich, there's purpose inside of that. So I think that anything we do, we can find purpose in, as long as we delve into how does it apply us.
absolutely, yeah. And being the show's major audience being healthcare professionals, I believe, like, the underlying purpose, probably for most of us, is helping people.
Sure.
And in reality, that's probably for most people, not even just health professionals, something to do with helping people. So if you're kind of struggling to figure out what that might be, then maybe explore that question: how do I help people? And
Yeah.
then, how do I help people in a way that makes me feel good as well? And if you can
Hmm.
answer that question, then you're probably going in the right direction.
Sure. And I think that
Now, if you
that's a
mean,
great point. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That it doesn't have to be a big, grandiose answer. Like I'm helping people because I'm saving thousands of lives at the ER right now. That's awesome. But it also could be, I'm helping this one person because I made them happier now. It's just this, to me, it's the same feeling.
yeah, different levels, different things, but human existence, human emotion, and moving forward, being positive.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about your journey throughout, and the number of things that you've done. You've got two kids, at an age where um, they're very malleable,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of input there. What is your perspective on work life balance? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, I think that I'm lucky, I'm blessed. I have my own practice, but I work 3.5 days, and so I work 3.5, I'm off 3.5, and eventually I think we'll probably go down to working 3 days. And I feel, so some patients are, you get that little jab, like, why aren't you coming in on Fridays? I always need you on Fridays, but really it's, if I was working more time right now in my life, I would give worse care to my patients on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because I want to have time to recharge with my family and recreate, which is, recreation is really recreating. Um, and so really the balance comes in how can I be lit up at work to be able to help my family, and how can I be lit up with my family to help me at work? And so I think that the balance, and it's not that easy for a lot of people. I know if you have a 40-hour work week job and you have to clock in, clock out per se, you can still create that. I think that, the key is to, well, one, you can't be a different person at your job than you are at home. I don't think that would work in the long run. Your integrity has to be there. You have to be the same person, or it's not going to work one way or the other. They're going to fall apart. One of those pillars is
Mm.
going to break if you're trying to be too different. But two, I think that again, purpose. It comes down to it is if you can connect with humanity, in my mind, at work, and you can connect with humanity at home, then you're doing a great job. And that's going to make you feel much more refreshed and ready to help come Monday, versus slogging through and being sad about work and then trying to all of a sudden turn it back on for your spouse and your kids at home. It's not going to work. So I think, again, self care comes into that, and doing things that help you stay joyful and inspired intentionally. Not to use the book again, but again, doing things like on purpose, like to wake up and decide that you're going to create your life, and then you kind of makes it a lot easier in the long run instead of just waking up and hitting snooze a few times and then going in and then being tired when you come home. So it's easier said than done, I think. But I also think, like we said, if you take smaller steps into that, those lead to bigger rewards on that balance between, if you can find your purpose and passion with other people, whether that's work or at home or, doing whatever, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, there's a third one that jumps in, but the ones we're talking about today is you spend most of your life either at work or with your family.
Yeah.
The third one is sleeping, but we're not talking about that today.
Yeah.
But with your work and your family, and so what I would highly recommend is jump on Amazon, grab the book Purposely Positive, because it may give you that right direction to start to question what it means to live intentionally and to live with inspiration. So, thank you so much for being on the show, Joel.
Thank you.
I think the listeners will get a lot out of that and help you to create some purpose, passion, inspiration, and intention in your life. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks. And we'll see you again for another episode of Questioning Authority soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Questioning Authority. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for the next one coming out soon. This episode has been brought to you by The Authority Co., helping service providers increase authority and revenue. Check out theauthorityco.com for more info.